They call it the Swiss Army knife of motorcycles. But once you get the KLR 650 onto some dicier terrain and some ATV trails, you find that the knife edge on that is a little bit dull. But there are a few things that you could do to make it a little bit better. So let's take a look at a dual sport build for the KLR 650. So the KLR 650 is a big bike. You know, all said and done with all the fluids and the fuel in there, it's like 430 pounds. That's a lot of weight to be smashing around through ATV trails and up through ruts and down through hills and slogging through mud. But it's capable of doing that. You know, if you want to take your KLR 650 out there, you know, you can definitely build it out to be a really good dual sport machine. So let's get at some of the core things that I've done, because I've done some things already to this bike that are just now inherent to the machine that I ride that are really good for dual sport. Number one, protection. Crash bars. I put the SW Motec crash bars on this bike pretty much as soon as I got the bike. You know, I bought the bike and then they were in the mail on the way to me. And as soon as I got them, I put them on. And I haven't taken them off since because they're just really, really good. They're solid welds. It's got a good protection profile all the way around this nice fairing plastic. And then it also guards up that radiator very well too. Plus it follows along down the bottom here near the engine casing. Now the engine casing is still exposed, but you know, I think these crash bars do a really good job. The second component is the bark busters. For me, this would be like priority 2. They're great at busted bark, but no, absolutely, right? But they're also great at keeping my controls from getting busted when I go down. Because going down on the trails, when you're starting to dial up the dual sport on this bike, that's gonna be, you know, part of the experience. It's a big bike. When it wants to go down, it's going down and there's not a lot you can do about it. So, best to be prepared for it. And the third element that I have really going on with this is the skid plate. So the SW Motec skid plate's on there too. It's been great to me. I took it off this year just to kind of clean that up and clean the bike all overall. And the amount of dings and scratches and nicks in that guy from all the rocks just banging into it, you know, that tells me it was worth the money and the frustration putting it on, but we won't go into that. That's a story for another time. A few other cool things that I've done to the bike to help it, you know, to boost that protective element, have been getting these, you know, these double take adventure mirrors. These are really good because they can take a really good hit and then you just need to reposition them. And if you don't want to reposition them, you just bring them in and then they're out of the way and they're not even a part of the equation anymore. But they're so good. A really good added feature there. So that's essentially most of the stuff I've already done. Some new stuff and something that we're going to leverage today are these Tuss pannier racks. Now these Tuss pannier racks are really solid in their construction and in the way they get installed to the bike. So they provide a little bit of crash protection in the back end as well. But today we're gonna leverage them and we're gonna use them for some dual sport style luggage, if you will, because I do like to carry some stuff out once I hit the trails. So I've got a Pelican case that I'm gonna use with that rack set. Plus I got something else I'm gonna put on the other side. But before we get into that, there's one more thing that it's been forever. Well overdue to do this, and that's to change out these foot pegs. So right off the showroom floor, the KLR 650 come with these awesome rubber foot pegs, and they're pretty good. Like I mentioned before, for my ADV build, I'm gonna keep them on there for long hauls because I like the way they dampen the vibration. However, what I don't like about them is how my foot slips off them as soon as my boots get a little bit muddy. So the cure for this are gonna be some brand new, a little bit more aggressive foot pegs. So my solution for foot pegs, the IMS Super Stock foot pegs. These look like a pretty mean foot peg. Not gonna lie, they're pretty teethy and stuff. So I'm excited to get these on. Like I said, that's long overdue. I've been meaning to get new foot pegs for the longest time. I'm so tired of getting out under the trails and just constantly having to clean my boot by dragging it on the ground before I put them back on the foot pegs that have all that rubber on them. They always end up sliding off. Also, it makes it a little bit more apprehensive for me to stand up on the bike, which is something I'm trying to get better at when I'm in the more technical terrain. So I'm hoping this wider profile, this more jagged tooth, will give me a little bit more grip and a little bit more confidence in that regard. So let's get these put on it, and that'll be our first step. Hardware you do need to keep from the old foot pegs that you have is this little crescent locking key washer thing and this little pen right here. So you want to keep those. So as far as putting these ones on, you just include for the spring. So you can see how this is all beveled out, so that'll fit right over. And the way it goes is so the hook is facing away from the foot peg a little bit, and that this flat hook section here just rests on this little joint. And then this hook will hook over top of this. So as you put them in, you just hook it on like that. And then you slide it in. And then you just kind of meander it into place. All right, that's the other one. Oh, wow. They're so much wider. Oh man, perfect. Oh, they're just so, wow, that's really cool. That's like super different. All right, so now that we have the foot pegs taken care of, let's talk about the suspension a little bit. Now, I will preface this with saying that I'm gonna do a full suspension upgrade a little bit later on. I'll do a video on that here too. It should be pretty cool. But what I want to talk about right now is what you can get out of the stock suspension for the KLR 650 to provide a bit more of a dual sport effect. A lot of the capability we have for adjusting the suspension stock is going to happen right at the rear shock. Now, I already talked a little bit about preload when I was talking about my ADV variant. Now, there's a bolt on the other side, and you can go in with a wrench and you can tighten that up. And you can see what will end up happening is the rear shock will be loaded up. So it becomes a little bit stiffer. The back end comes up a little bit higher. The other thing that's really important is the damping, all right? The damping. Because consider yourself on a trail. Think about being on a trail and you're going downhill and you're transitioning, weaving across it. Maybe there's two wheel tracks and the washout rut in the middle. Heavy rut in the center. Left is looking good. Yeah, right's a disaster. Oh yeah, she's rough. You can just hear the back swing arm just slapping. When you move across that washout, the back tire is dropping into it and coming back up. Now, if you're going downhill and the weight is all on the front of the bike, the weight is off the back of the bike. Consider yourself standing up. You're over top of that gas tank. So if the damping is set really loose, all right, if there's not a lot of damping, what's going to happen is the tire is going to drop into that rut and slap back up into the bike here. And you'll hear this clunking noise, like clunk, 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 clunk. You'll almost hear like the chain slapping, the sway bar slapping. Well, the way to adjust that so that it doesn't come up and slap as much is to increase the damping, and that's right down here. So the damping adjustment is right here. So this little notch here will show a little H and an S on this side. And it'll give you an indication on which way to turn it to get either a softer or a harder dampening. Now, the way this works is if you turn it clockwise, you're gonna get it a little bit harder, right? If you turn it counterclockwise, you're pulling it out and you're making it a little bit softer. Now, one of the biggest recommendations to do this is think about, how much you weigh, basically. So what you can do is you can back it all out and then give it a turn based on that. So here's a good way. So for a 150 pound rider, what you would do is you back all this all the way out until it stops. You'll feel it stop, and then you give it one full turn for 150 pounds. For me, I want this a little bit tighter. Plus, I'm not 150 pounds. Spoiler. So I'm gonna go for 2 turns and 1/4. And I'm gonna see where that works. So with suspension, it's a trial and error type thing. The only way you're gonna know you're gonna have it set right is if you get out onto the trails and ride it and then adjust. So what I'd suggest to do is that when you go out onto the trails, go with the settings that you have with your gut, and then bring along some tools and then maybe ride it through some different types of terrain, different types of, slaloms, go downhill, uphill, and then make adjustments based on that to the preload and damping. Anyway, now to get to some more fun and more interesting things that go into this dual sport build. So yeah, so when I'm out on the trails, flexing that dual sport element of the KLR 650, I do like to have, the tiniest bit of luggage left just so I can store some things. So what I got is a really cool top opening Pelican style case from Princess Auto. So like Princess Auto, the equivalent in the United States is like Harbor Freight. Anyway, this is a really cool case. It opens just at the top and it has tons of volume in there to pack just a few things in, because I like to carry my camera gear. I like to carry obviously, right? But the benefit of the Tusk pannier racks that I put on earlier is that they come along with like these quick release mounts, which are really, really awesome. And in addition to all that, they give you, hold on a sec, they give you like all the hardware that you need to kind of pretty much install anything on there, like I mentioned. So the goal right now is going to be, pretty much mount that on and do some test fitting and get that going. And then even after that, I'll show you what I'll do to the other side. So let's get to getting that Pelican case on first. All right, let's get started and rack this up. So like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the bike is really big for ATV trails. I know whenever I get out there and I start really pushing it on some of the more trickier, more technical terrain, I start sweating huge. And all I can think about is water, and I never bring enough water. So behold, we're gonna include a water jerry. So the first question you might be thinking about when you see this is, why not bring just fuel? Well, here's the thing. This is like a Rotopax type. It's like an Amazon equivalent. It's not Rotopax. So that's one thing right there. But I don't trust fuel in these jerrys on a bike that could potentially go down. So if I wipe out and all of this fuel goes all over the ground, that's a spill. That's a bad spill. And that ground is contaminated. And the only way to get that ground back to good is to dig it up with an excavator. It's crazy. So for me, if I was going to carry fuel on the bike, I would do it in an MSR bottle in much smaller quantities, and that would be secured very well on the bike. So I still want something like this, but I'm thinking about fueling myself instead of the bike. So there we go. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to mount this. Now, I've already got a plan for that. So let's go and get at it. All right, so the plan for this is to, again, leverage this quick release system. I've already prepared a little bit of stock here for us. So I've got a bit of this like steel with like the perforated holes in it. So the way this is gonna work is I mount that here. Then I grab U-bolts that came with this and essentially run them under each one like that. And then it just mounts to it. So let's get at her. So now another thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to actually install this little bar here, but I'm going to move it up so that it extends past it. See how it extends past a little bit there? And I'll show you why I'm doing that here in a little bit. Yeah, it's not going anywhere. So now I'm going to put this right on. And we'll take it over and fit it to the bike. All right, let's fit this guy on there. Pretty good, eh? Although, anybody who owns a KLR knows that that's gonna just rattle the brain to craziness. But remember what we did. We brought that out a little bit, right? And what do we have still left to use? Rock solid now. Now this bike is starting to look pretty rad. All right, I cannot wait to get this bike out onto the trails and see how this thing performs. I mean, I've always had a little bit of a dual sport variant of the KLR 650 before, but nothing so dialed in. I mean, I've got the protection already going, which is already awesome. But now I've got some way more stable foot pegs. The suspension is actually well thought out and tuned properly. At least I believe. We'll dial it in once we get into the trails a bit more, but I believe I'm gonna have a bit more of a tighter suspension, a bit more of a firmer action on the damping too. So when we're transitioning between those ruts, there's gonna be a lot less of that sway bar slapping up against the bike and a lot more of me being more stable standing up. So I think my confidence going into the trails is gonna be way better with this heavy machine. Plus, we've also got a few little neat things onto the side. We've got some more luggage, so I'm less worried about putting things in my luggage and taking it out onto a muddy trail now. Also, I've got some water on the side there too, so if we ever need to rehydrate, we've got it in spades. No problem at all. Such a cool bike build. I love how adaptive the KLR 650 can be. It's such a cool bike for that. And I believe that this is gonna be a really cool and fun bike to take out on the trails this summer. I hope this has inspired you a little bit to create something similar. I'd love to see your dual sport variants. I'd love to see the kind of bikes that you put out on the trails, Highland Riders. And if you want to show me that, definitely go over to Instagram, follow me there, and tag me in some photos. I'd love to see some of the cool stuff that you guys come up with and put out on the trails as far as the KLR 650 is concerned, or whatever you take out on the trails, be it a Jeep, or maybe you take a big Goldwing or a BMW, who knows? Anyway, if you'd like to see this bike in action, I strongly recommend that you subscribe to the channel. Every Monday we have a new motorcycle adventure, and a lot of times those adventures end up taking us deep into the woods and some crazy trails, and I'd love to share that with you. Anyway, if you're on your on-season, ride safe. And if you're waiting for your season to start, well, it's almost here. It's super close actually. Anyway, until then, Island Riders, take care.